So AB 2108, which is on page 3 of your bill tracking report, is a bill by Assemblymember Susan Eggman, and it was brought to our attention a few weeks ago, and staff have been spending some time evaluating its potential impacts and kind of comparing it to the policies and recommendations of the Delta Plan. Essentially, 2108 is a bill that deals with development in flood hazard areas. In order to understand 2108, you really have to have some background on current law related to flood management. And in particular, in 2007, SB 5 was passed by was authored by then Senator Mike Machado. Current law under SB 5 requires cities and counties in the San Joaquin Valley to revise local plans and zoning to be consistent with the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, which was adopted in July of last year. Once those updates are complete, cities and counties are prohibited under current law to approve development in flood hazard areas unless they make certain findings. So essentially, under current law for urban areas, cities and counties must make findings that adequate progress is being made towards the required urban flood protection standard, which is called the 200-year flood protection standard, or they must make findings that they already meet that standard. Under AB 2108, this bill would create some exemptions in the development prohibition and would redefine adequate progress. So, for example, under some of the changes proposed in 2108, unoccupied structures would be okay even in advance of 200-year flood protection in an urban area. Remodels and expansions would be okay. And then also, cities and counties could appeal to the Central Valley Flood Protection Board to get broad discretion for approving development. So staff have identified two concerns related to the Delta Plan and this bill. First is that if there are delays or exemptions in meeting the 200-year urban flood protection standard, then you obviously run the risk of increased risk to people and property until that standard is in place. So you increase the risk pool. Also, the bill has potential implications for state flood liability, and we have a specific Delta Plan recommendation advising against increasing state flood liability. And it was really the major impetus for the 2007 SB 5 flood protection law and the 200-year urban standard in the first place. Now, just as some context, in 2007, we were coming off the heels of Hurricane Katrina. There was increased flood protection interest in California, and that was the context in which these policy decisions were made. Now, City of Stockton, who is very interested in this bill, is also in a tough position because they face essentially a development moratorium. They are apparently not close to reaching a 200-year standard, although they have some plans in place where they might be able to get there. So we wanted to raise this bill to your attention since it does appear to conflict with some of the strategies and recommendations in the Delta Plan. It is headed to the Senate. It's made it successfully out of the Assembly, and so we plan to monitor it closely, and we've heard that amendments may be on the way once the bill is in the Senate. Are there any questions?
Any questions of Jessica?
I just have. Larry? Part of SB 5 was that DWR would provide maps of 200-year flood protection. To date, we are still waiting for those. So it's hard for a locale to draw plans when we don't know what is required. And so that was the impetus on this bill. There's no, as far as I'm concerned, we're not trying to get out of providing 200-year flood protection. We'd just like to know what it is. In the past, I've been involved with SJAFCA, which is the flood control agency. When FEMA came to town in '96 and said, you need to beef up your flood protection for 100-year, we were able to put that together. Basically, in three and a half years, We were told to do it, we designed it, we funded it, we built it, and we went back to Washington to tell the Corps we had completed it, and we'd paid the Corps here in Sacramento to sign off on everything we'd done. When we got back there, their comment was, we said, well, we're finished. And they said, oh, you're finished with the feasibility study? We said, no, we're finished with the whole project. And that was part of WRDA in 96 as a named project. So local people can do what they're asked to do if they're told what that standard is. And so I do not believe, Pat can probably speak to this also, we think that the Eggman bill is just trying to give the locals a chance to understand what's required, design it, fund it, and build it. We're getting squeezed because we haven't gotten that data yet. So I don't believe that the Eggman bill, when it finally comes out, will allow unfettered development to try and get out from under the 200-year protection. But it's very important that we are not collateral damage to the fact that the state has not provided us with the requirements that we need for flood protection.
Jessica and I met with Assemblymember Eggman and her staff about the bill, and as Jessica reported, we anticipate amendments in the Senate and probably a vigorous exploration of these issues by the Policy Committee and perhaps amendments offered by Department of Water Resources. Assemblymember Eggman indicated her concern is highly developed areas such as downtown Stockton, but acknowledged it may also apply to Natomas and many other more recently developed areas, and the prospect, as Jessica indicated, of a de facto moratorium. Among our expressed concerns, in addition to the ones that Jessica made clear, including potential state liability, or clarification as to what an urbanizing area is, because the language of the bill indicates that an approved area for development, not yet developed, but planned or anticipated to have 10,000 residents or more within the next 10 years, might qualify for this permitting over the first 18 months and subsequent 18 months, total of 3 years, that could be permitted by the Central Valley Flood Control Board. That's not what the author says she's interested in authorizing, so we need some clarification with that. Secondly, the objective is greater flood protection, and adding structures in a flood-prone area over the next 18 months to 3 years may not boost the chances of overall flood protection if there's no financing plan. And this bill essentially withdraws the necessity to have a financing plan in place. With that, it is a serious issue for Delta cities and the possibility of a moratorium, but we need to make our case about consistency with the Delta plan and the need for flood protection. So I think we would hope that the bill will undergo some satisfactory amendments, and to that we would revisit it rather than take a position at this time.
Phil?
I remember with great clarity. Senator Machado's effort to increase from a 100-year protection level to 200-year protection level, and the fight that ensued to see that it was done. The irony, of course, is that there is no flood engineer in California who argues successfully that lowering the standards for as state law says, an inherently flood-prone area is a great idea. To the extent this legislation creates additional delay in meeting what everyone concedes is a low 200 years, a low standard under anyone's circumstance. When I went to the Netherlands in 2009 at the invitation of a group to speak about the Delta and what the state of California was doing, I actually was astounded to learn that they speak in terms of urban flood protection levels at 10,000-year flood protection level, and some people are arguing you use a standard of 100,000 years. And we've got to find a different way to talk about this. The difference between a 100 and a 200-year flood protection level can often be 3 inches on top of a levee. And most people would think that is not much. And guess what? It's not much. So without regard to San Joaquin County, but with some information on Sacramento, we have always deplored in this community moratoriums. But we have always said that flood protection should come largely with federal money, not with local money. And I for one, am highly concerned that a poorly written bill would jeopardize flood protection in this community under the faint belief that somewhere there's a giant pot of money that's going to pay for everything. So as we study this, and as you guys work with the author, just kind of note my concern that this would be. Initially, I think it would be a major step backwards from the advance of social policy, and I'd vote today to oppose the bill as written because of the concerns, but I defer to the staff and Pat's judgment on this issue.
So council members have offered some good thoughts, and I presume that we'll continue to monitor this and provide
That's
updates.
right. I mean, given the willingness of the author and the author's office to continue discussions and to work towards solutions, we're not recommending a position at this time. We're recommending that we just continue discussions. I will keep you apprised as the chair if any activity develops in between council meetings that requires action.
Very good. I should insert at this point for the record that council members Gray and Eisenberg joined us after we reconvened from closed session. We now have 6 council members seated at the front table.
Okay, well,